In the heat of battle, the swordsman who grips his blade too tightly will find his movements stiff and predictable. The archer whose hands tremble with desperate need to hit the target will watch their arrow fly wide. This is the paradox that Miyamoto Musashi, Japan's greatest swordsman and author of The Book of Five Rings, understood with crystalline clarity. The harder you try, the worse it gets. This counterintuitive principle strikes at the heart of human striving and reveals a profound truth about the nature of excellence and mastery. In our achievement-obsessed culture, where trying harder is prescribed as the universal remedy for failure, Musashi's wisdom feels almost subversive. Yet it points toward a deeper understanding of how human capability actually works, and why our most desperate efforts often sabotage the very outcomes we seek. The paradox of excessive effort. Musashi's insight emerges from a fundamental observation about consciousness and action. When we try too hard, we create a split within ourselves. Part of our mind performs the action while another part monitors, judges, and interferes with that performance. This self-consciousness introduces a fatal lag between perception and response. Consider conversation. When you're relaxed and engaged, words flow naturally. You respond authentically, make jokes spontaneously, and the interaction feels effortless. But introduce anxiety. Perhaps you're trying to impress someone important, and suddenly that ease vanishes. You monitor every word, second-guess your jokes, become acutely aware of your body language. The conversation becomes mechanical and strained. You're trying too hard, and it shows. This phenomenon isn't limited to social interactions. Athletes call it choking under pressure. Musicians experience stage fright that makes practiced fingers stumble. Writers know it as the blank page that grows blanker the more desperately they stare. In each case, excessive trying creates psychological tension that interferes with the very abilities we're attempting to deploy. Musashi's path, the way of no mind. Musashi described the ideal state of the warrior as no mind or mushin, a condition where action flows directly from perception without deliberative thought. This isn't mindlessness but total presence where trained abilities express themselves naturally, without self-conscious control. In his duels, Musashi often faced technically skilled opponents who fought with what he called attached mind, consciousness fixated on particular techniques, outcomes, or fears. These opponents could be predicted and defeated because their excessive trying made them rigid. Musashi cultivated a fluid responsiveness that allowed him to adapt instantaneously to whatever emerged in combat. He wrote, "You must understand that there is more than one path to the top of the mountain. The person who tries too hard to follow one specific path becomes blind to the terrain itself. They're so focused on their predetermined route that they miss the easier way opening beside them." The mechanics of trying too hard. Peak performance requires integrating conscious intention with unconscious competence. You must know what you want to achieve, but the mechanics of achievement must flow from trained instinct rather than deliberate control. When you learn to ride a bicycle, you consciously thought about balance, pedaling, steering. But at some point, these actions integrated into a fluid whole. If you now tried to ride while consciously controlling every micro-adjustment, you'd likely crash. The skill requires learned automaticity that conscious interference destroys. The same applies across all domains. A pianist who thinks about each finger placement will stumble. A basketball player who deliberates about shooting form at release will miss. Excellence requires training your unconscious competence and then trusting it, not trying to manually control what should flow automatically. Excessive trying also creates muscle tension that impairs performance. When you grip too tightly, whether a sword, pen, or tennis racket, you limit the tool's natural mobility. Musashi understood the ideal grip is firm enough to maintain connection but relaxed enough to allow instant adjustment. This physical principle reflects a broader psychological truth. Forcing outcomes through sheer will creates rigidity that undermines adaptability. The practice paradox. Here's where Musashi's teaching becomes subtle. He wasn't advocating for passive acceptance or lack of effort. Musashi was famous for his brutal training regimen, his discipline, and relentless refinement of technique. He practiced obsessively, fought over 60 duels, and continuously pushed his boundaries. The resolution lies in understanding the difference between practice and performance. In practice, you work hard, deliberately, consciously. You break down techniques, repeat movements until ingrained, analyze weaknesses, and systematically improve. This is the place for trying, for effort, for conscious development. But when the moment of performance arrives, you must transition from trying to allowing. You must trust the competence you've developed and let it express itself without interference. The archer practices for thousands of hours, but when the arrow must fly, they simply release. No last-minute adjustments, no desperate trying, just the natural unfolding of trained ability. This is why Musashi could be both rigorously disciplined and effortlessly spontaneous. The discipline occurred in practice, building the foundation. The effortlessness emerged in performance, trusting that foundation. Applications beyond the sword. While Musashi's context was martial, his principle applies universally. The writer who sits down trying desperately to write something brilliant will produce self-conscious garbage. But the writer who shows up consistently, practices their craft, and simply writes what wants to be written often produces their best work. The trying happens in showing up, the creation itself must flow. In relationships, trying too hard to be liked often makes you unlikable. The effort to impress creates artificiality that others sense and distrust. Authentic connection requires presence and genuineness, qualities that emerge only when you're not trying to manufacture a particular impression. In problem-solving, breakthroughs often arrive not when you're straining at the difficulty but when you step back. How many solutions emerge in the shower, on walks, or before sleep? In these moments you've stopped forcing the answer. Your prepared mind continues working unconsciously, and insight surfaces when you relax your grip on the problem. Even in emotional life, trying too hard to be happy often ensures misery. Happiness emerges as a byproduct of engagement, meaning, and connection, not from direct pursuit. Peace comes from accepting what is, not from forcing what should be. The balance of effort. The deepest wisdom in Musashi's teaching isn't simply, don't try. It's understanding when to apply effort and when to release it, when to control and when to allow, when to act and when to wait. Some people need to try harder. Those who avoid difficulty, who give up easily, who never develop skills because they never commit to necessary practice. For them, the problem isn't excessive trying but insufficient engagement. But for the anxious overachiever, the perfectionist, the person strangling their potential with desperate grasping, for these people, Musashi's wisdom is medicine. They need to learn they can trust their preparation, release the illusion of total control, and recognize that excellence emerges not from forcing but from allowing what they've cultivated to express itself naturally. The key is cultivating right effort, engagement that's energetic but not strained, persistent but not rigid, committed but not attached to specific outcomes. This is the effort that builds capability during practice. Then, in the moment of performance, release that effort and trust what you've become. Living the paradox. In our contemporary context, this wisdom is perhaps more relevant than ever. We live in an era of relentless striving, where rest is stigmatized and hustle is valorized. We're told success requires constant effort, that we must try harder, do more, push beyond limits. Yet the results are epidemic burnout and anxiety. We're trying harder than ever while feeling less capable, less effective, less alive. Musashi points toward a different way. Not laziness or passivity, but relaxed intensity. Full engagement without desperate grasping. Committed practice that builds capability, followed by performances that trust that capability. Effort in its proper place, and ease in its proper place. The harder you try, the worse it gets, not because trying is bad, but because trying at the wrong moment, in the wrong way, creates the very obstacles it seeks to overcome. The alternative isn't not trying. It's understanding the deeper rhythm of preparation and release, cultivation and expression, discipline and trust. In the end, Musashi's teaching asks us to develop a different relationship with effort itself. To recognize when our trying helps and when it hinders. To practice the hardest skill of all, the ability to let go at exactly the right moment and allow what we've prepared to simply flow through us, natural as breathing, effortless as water finding its path downhill. This is the way of the master. Not forcing, not passive, simply present, prepared, and free.